Hi, welcome to Classics Confidential. My name's Henry Stead. I'm here with Caroline Bird to talk about the Trojan Women at the Gate, which is currently at the Gate and running all the way until
15th of December.
And I've been lucky enough to go twice, yeah. And it's blown me away both times.
I mean, I can say, it's about the aftermath of the Trojan War, and it's about the women, who are left waiting to find out which Greek general has taken them as a slave. Mm-hmm. It's about kind of specifically the women and how they are punished in the aftermath.
In the aftermath of the Battle of Troy.
And how they punish each other as well. Yeah, I mean, there's this kind of horrible situation in which, all the way through, Hecuba is blaming Helen of Troy. Helen of Troy was the reason for the entire war, and definitely she had a part in it. But Paris doesn't get the blame for eloping with her. All the men who fought the war don't get the blame for killing everyone. It's this horrible reality that when these women are put in a totally powerless situation, they start, instead of solidarity, they start turning on each other, blaming each other for not being good enough mothers or not being good enough daughters.
Quite often, when these new kind of versions or adaptations of classical plays come along, they kind of act as a platform through which a playwright and director and people involved make comments about social and political comments about the time. So it's more about the present than necessarily about the past. Is that ring true for your play?
I mean, definitely when I'm writing a scene, I'm not thinking about words like social, political, and things like that, because I have to think about the characters. And when I was writing the play, I had to invent a new Hecuba, and a new chorus and a new Cassandra, in order to write as if they'd never said those things before, because it has to be happening for the first time on stage. And so, I mean, the two people who are on stage the most, who, objectively speaking, represent the kind of big class barrier in Troy, are Hecuba, the former queen, and the chorus, who in my version is one pregnant woman handcuffed to the bed, who's come from humble origins, and as she says, to Hecuba, I don't think we're from the same area, because they're two people who would never, in any other circumstance, be in the same room together. Does reveal quite a few of the hypocrisies inherent in the ruling of Troy. The fact that Hecuba recounts this amazingly decadent and luxurious vision of what Troy was like, with lilac painted steps leading down into the water, and fireworks and things like that. And the chorus is not from that place,
No.
So there's a lot of implications of corruption, but also there's lots of pettiness between them. In my version, Talthybius, the Greek herald, tries to soften them up by giving them sandwiches, right? And he offers them the very posh wild crayfish from Rocket, or coronation chicken, which is like a queen's favourite sandwich, or egg mayonnaise,
And the chorus chooses
egg mayonnaise. So there's even a hierarchy in the sandwiches. They're trapped in this room, this mother and baby unit. All of their struggles are condensed down into that very small space. So their power struggles become about, getting each other a glass of water. Who's going to be in control of the water dispenser? Who's going to, be in control of the sandwiches? Who gets the sheet from the bed? When Helen first arrived in Troy, Hecuba thought she was the bee's knees. Like they said, no, you can't have her back to Greece. Helen was this amazing asset, and in a way made the whole of Troy feel sexy and bigger than itself. They had the most beautiful woman in the world, and I kind of drew out that idea. And so there is, and then as soon as things start going wrong, Hecuba turns on Helen. but there's quite a strange sexual tension between them. Not necessarily like, not in a romantic way, but in more of a, Hecuba is absolutely expresses fierce disgust about Helen's sexuality and the way she uses her sexuality, right? But by doing so, Hecuba's also recognising that Helen has this extreme power, over people. And so when Helen comes in my production, she's just come out of the shower. She's wearing a towel, and there's only Hecuba and the chorus also on stage, and she drops the towel and effectively gives Hecuba an order. Says, "Would you mind turning around for a sec?" And Hecuba, the queen of Troy, who doesn't take orders from anyone, turns around, all blustered.
Talthybius is another obviously big character, and he I guess kind of represents. He's a little closer to the chorus in a way. He kind of exists within the world where popular culture is the norm.
It's more like Talthybius has this idea of himself as an ordinary guy, because he's come from, again, a kind of humble origins, as opposed to royal decadence, right? And he's got a wife and 2 kids back in Greece, but he's been at a war for 10 years now, and he takes a baby away to be thrown off the battlements. And also there's something deeply cowardly and quite nasty about Talthybius, I think, and I think this is in Euripides as well, this idea of delivering terrible news and not wanting the people that you're delivering it to make a judgment on you. It's like going, please don't, think that I'm bad.
Yeah.
And that it's kind of horrible to expect someone not to hate you, when you're delivering that message, and for that to be what you're caring about as well.
Yeah, hiding behind the sort of chain of command thing. He's a climber, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's
and he hides behind kind of ordinariness when it suits him, But there's also deep set ambition in him, whereas the chorus, her eyes are a lot more open. But she's also, has no... she's handcuffed to the bed.
Yeah.
Literally. So there's the jokes that are at Hecuba and the rest of the people in power, which is about laughing at their hypocrisies, right? And then there's the kind of bitter jokes that they make themselves. For instance, Andromache is talking about when Achilles, the fact that Achilles' son, has chosen her as, a slave, and she says, all because he's heard about my famous fucking salmon on holidays tarts, right? And then the chorus laughs, and then Andromache says, it's not funny, right? But she did make a joke, but the chorus isn't allowed to laugh in it. But there's all these shifts. And there's the bitter jokes that are made about violence, and often we would, I think, in the context of our society, there would be an extremely bad taste, right? Yeah. But Hecuba says, "Do you think it's easy to kill a baby?" And Andromache says, "Yeah, leave it in the sink and put the tap on." Right?
And you don't, as an audience member, you don't know, it's a joke, so you kind of feel the urge to laugh, but then you can't, and there's a general silence.
It's unsettling, and because, but then the setup of that whole scene, Euripides' scene is quite strange, right? Because people talk about it being a scene full of pathos, right? Because it's about Andromache's baby getting taken away, which is true in some sense, but he sets it up so that before Talthybius comes on to say that he's going to take Astyanax, Andromache is blaming Hecuba for not having killed Paris at birth, right? So there's this horrible irony being set up that Andromache is saying, you should have killed your child, right? What's, one baby compared to a nation? You should have done it, and then Talthybius comes on and takes her child, and she's forced to realise that she was wrong in the worst kind of sense. And that's quite a dangerous, strange scene, in itself. Because Andromache is not set up as, you know, a simple, caring mother. Because what simple caring mother would say that to Hecuba, you know? But these are people who've been twisted every which way by anger and violence and, you know, horror. Like they're really damaged, basically.
Yeah.
Really damaged, and that's what I wanted to really draw upon in the play. And that's what, you know, I mean, damaged people don't always behave in the way that we would expect them to.
Sometimes shock gets a bad press, you know, the shock tactics and such. But actually, it's one of the most powerful things you could probably harness in the theatre to be kind of taken to that awkward sense of not, is this all right? And what's the deal with that? Do you think?
Like, I mean, that phrase "shock tactics." You know, people bandy that around as if shock is always something that's superficial, right? Yeah. But women waiting to find out, you know, which general has taken them as a slave, you know, and the whole of Troy being burnt to the ground and mass genocide. It is really shocking.
Yeah.
And what's even more shocking about the play is that in the context of that, they're still arguing about who had sex with who, right? Yeah. And who, you know, who didn't love who enough, and who was, you know, and arguing about sheets and water dispensers, and like the play is really shocking.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So if I kind of, but that doesn't mean. I think people mistake the word subtlety for quietness and you know, predictability, right? Which is not what that means, right? Yeah. Your subtlety doesn't. You can be loudly subtle, right?
Yeah.
You know, and full of anguish, because it's very difficult to kind of figure out exactly why all the characters respond in the way they do. Yeah. You know, because they're all coming from a place of pain, and they were, a lot of them weren't that nice to begin with, you know.
When these characters, when you first got to know them through reading Euripides, how did you did they spring off the page, or did they take a while to emerge?
Well, I read every translation I could get my hands on, and then I put them aside. I forgot them on purpose because I had to find new characters, but from all of those, you know, whilst keeping all of that in my head. I mean,
what about the sequence of events? You must have, because that.
Oh yeah, kept the structure. Yeah.
So is that a case of like maybe taking it, like writing it all out, or do you have a plan as some kind of diagram somewhere on the wall?
I'd like to, you know, say I had huge.
The whole room.
I made a mosaic out of my post-it notes. No.
It's all on computer.
Yeah.
Track the changes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I butted in there really. I want to know about the nuts and bolts of the composition, but then that's quite difficult to answer because partly you forget.
Yeah.
Because it's a long process. It took you at the first draft 2 months something. I
had to find a character that I could imagine meeting and that I could hear thinking and talking.
Yeah.
Right. So take Hecuba for instance. From Euripides, I picked up on a few key points, which I kind of then became the character.
Yeah.
You know, as well as, you know, the obvious in terms of like that she's you know, a queen.
Yeah.
Right. Who's lost 7 children, and you know the rest of her children are in danger, etc. Right. So you've got all that, right? But you've also got the fact that she is with a chorus of women, right, in the Euripides, and she's saying, "My grief is the worst," right? So you've got. I think when I first started, I said to Chris about the kind of conundrum of finding Hecuba. It's like, what would happen if the most dramatic thing happened to the most dramatic person in the world? You know, Hecuba is self-dramatizing, but she's gone through, you know, the worst trauma as well. And of course we feel for her in the way that we feel for anybody, right? But that doesn't mean we have to like her either.
I don't think we do like
No.
her in this play. Like, I think
But
she's
you can kind of understand
yeah.
more towards the end. You know,
Yes.
the world from which she's come and what she's had to, in her mind, sacrifice in order to fulfil her role.
Mm.
You know.
kind of stiff upper lip sort of thing. Is that?
Yeah, and you stand by your man, and you know she talks about, in my version, you know, talks about like Priam would sign a death warrant, you know, and in order to make him feel less alone, she'd tell the doorman to flog the gardener.
Yeah.
You know, like this kind of living with this the normality of violence, and I mean Hecuba has a deep belief in revenge as justice. They are synonymous for her. And so it's about how do we judge someone by our values, or do we judge them according to the value system that they have in place? You know, I mean, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Well, basically, the play is structured around three main entrances.
Yeah.
You know, Cassandra, Andromache, and Helen.
Yeah.
Right. Menelaus enters, but that is part of Helen's entrance.
Yeah,
almost,
yeah,
she brings him in her wake, as it were, and Euripides. A lot of critics, you know, generally interpret those three different characters as playing upon the roles of the virgin, the mother, and the whore, right, in a very kind of generalised way. And so it felt natural to cast one woman as all those three things, you know, to kind of confound the premise of it. Also, the Gate doesn't have enough money to employ anybody.
Yes, well, that's an interesting example of how you know practical. The theatre's a very practical medium, and were there other kind of examples of that where you had for very practical reasons had to get sort of other creative.
Well, there was one thing that I really wanted to happen. In my script, at the end, the water dispenser turns red with blood, right? Which is genius. And that it couldn't happen because we'd have to drill a hole in the wall, and then in order to make the water dispenser just like turn red at the end. Yeah. You know, it's a lot more complicated. So there was a few things where I couldn't get my way.
Yeah.
Is that enough now?
Yeah.
Stop now.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.